Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Live life. Live fully.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. By sharing our collective expertise, we will show you how to harness, control, and use your own skill set to achieve ultimate success and live the life you want. And now, please welcome your host.
Good to have you once again. This is your host, Omobola Stephen, on Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. The show focused on personal development and self-improvement topics, with the occasion of expert and professionals who are hardened in these topics. Now, I'd like to remind the audience of the show that personal development is a lifelong process that we all must embrace in order to be who we actually meant to be in life. Right, on today's show, I have Phyllis Leavitt, who is a psychotherapist, and she'll be talking more about mental health issues and how we can get it right, especially in the United States. Now, welcome me on the show today, Phyllis Leavitt.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks for joining me on the show once again. Now, Phyllis, in your own words, and I quote, we are on a collision course with our own extinction, and I see this as a national and global mental health crisis that is not being addressed. Now, the question is, what would you say this?
Why do I say that?
That's right.
Yes. Well, basically what I see as a psychotherapist of many, many years and having worked with, in the microcosm of the individual and the family, I've learned a lot over the years about what kinds of human relationships work for us, that are fulfilling, that are safe, that are cooperative, and in which people can resolve differences without violence. And what I have wanted to do in my new book is bring that understanding to the family of America. And when I look at some of the dynamics playing out, especially in government and in large institutions, and with some of the people in positions of great power, I see a mirror image of some of the most destructive and abusive dynamics that we find in really dysfunctional families. And for me, those issues are mental health issues. They're really not. We're presented with these issues as if they're ideological divisions between us or political separation of different ideologies. But in fact, from the lens of psychotherapy and psychology, they're really mental health issues. And the reason I say that is very simply this. If someone in your neighborhood stole your bike or your car, or they broke into your house and assaulted somebody in your home, or painted, negative signs on your property, we would say they're disturbed. We would say there's something wrong with that person. And hopefully today we're asking, what happened to that person that they would behave that way? Why are we having multiple mass shootings in our country? What's happened to these people? They're disturbed. There's something mentally ill about them. And so if our government and people in power are behaving the same way, if they're discriminating, if they're withholding resources from some of our own citizens, if they're assaulting some of our own citizens or labeling them in a really negative way or murdering them, that's mental illness. There's no justification on a psychological level for that kind of behavior. Short of, outright self-defense, of course. And so that's why I call it a mental health issue, that mentally healthy people seek to cooperate. They seek to work out their differences with other people in a peaceful way. They listen to what other people have to say with respect. They have good boundaries around what they allow and what they don't allow into their own space, or what they do in regard to other people. They're loving, they're caring, they share. So that's why I look at what's going on in our country as a severe mental health crisis that's escalating, because the violence is escalating, the hatred is escalating, and the rhetoric around that in our social media and in many areas of what influences our young people is not the kind of role model that we would actually want in our families for our children.
Right. Now, you also said, and I quote in your word, that many answers of how to heal our human relations and restore us to peace and safety are already known and used effectively in the field of psychotherapy. Phyllis, what are we missing here?
Yeah, I think that there's many things that we're missing. Let me just start by saying I have worked with hundreds of people over the years. I have never met one person, whether it's in my office or out of my office, who wants more hatred or more violence in their life. We all want more safety, more peace, more love, more being provided for with the necessities of life, more a sense of meaning and purpose. And yet the gap between what we want for ourselves and what we legislate and what we condone on a national level is enormous. And so one of the things that I really like to share with people as information is, I see this epidemic of abuse, not just coming from the top down, but from the bottom up. Our families are in trouble. Like I said, I have worked with hundreds of people over the years, people who, own their homes, or they pay their rent and they keep their jobs. They get up in the morning and they get their kids fed and they go to work, and they are suffering. The amount of abuse that gets reported to me from the average citizen, abuse, neglect, addiction, discrimination, depression, anxiety, having sustained violence in their childhood or in their present life is really enormous. And I don't know that the average person in America realizes this, or that we have permission to talk about it. It's not just the most targeted populations in our country, and certainly there are populations in our country that are terribly targeted for abuse and violence and discrimination and neglect. But even the average family is suffering. Many, certainly not all, but many. And many people are just trying to overcome the negative circumstances and conditioning that they grew up with, or that they experienced, especially like in school or in the workplace, as well as in their homes. And so my focus is on what is needed to heal the family, because as you heal the family, you heal the individuals that leave the family and individuate and go into the world and become the bosses in business. They become the teachers in the school. They become the people who run for office. And so am I sort of being clear? It's like from the bottom up and the top down that we want to look at creating safety, peace, love, connection, and cooperation. And I think to really understand how to begin to do that, my beginning place is education. I think, and this is part of what my book is devoted to, what are the dynamics of abuse? What perpetuates them? How do we break the cycle, whether it's for an individual, a family, or a country? And what I'm saying is that I really believe that psychotherapy and the world of psychology holds a lot of the answers of how to do that. Is it perfect? No. Do we know how to heal every wounded person who acts out? No, we don't know that yet. but we know a lot about what is needed to create a healthy family environment. And I can say some of those elements if you want me to, but I want to make space for you to ask me some questions or let me know what you're thinking.
No, you can go ahead because you emphasize family, and I think that's also very important in my next question. Maybe you can also go ahead with what you're talking about. What is the direct correlation between the most destructive family dynamics on the individual level and many of the behaviors and actions of some of our most powerful institutions and leaders?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Can you say that just a
My
little more
question is,
slowly?
yes, my question is, what is the direct correlation between the most destructive family dynamics on the individual level and
Okay.
many of the behaviors and actions of some of our most powerful institutions and leaders?
Yes. Yes, and I think this is what you're asking me, like, and I go into detail about this in my book because I really don't know that this is common knowledge. So like I said, part of the purpose of my book is to be educational and more. But some of the parallels between the most abusive and destructive families and an abusive and a destructive government are these, that abusers in individual families pick their targets. They scapegoat someone. It could be everyone, but sometimes it's one child or their spouse or just the boys or just the girls. But they pick a target and they act out whatever their power impulses are, whether it's sexual abuse, physical violence, emotional violence, abandonment, whatever form the abuse takes, and sometimes it takes many forms at once. And then they blame their victims for what they do. Well, he talked back, so I had to beat him. Or she didn't clean up her room, so I locked her out of the house. There's always a justification for the abuse that they heap on others. And abusive governments do the same thing. They call certain people inferior or lazy or thugs, or they don't belong here because they didn't get born here, or whatever they do to justify their inhumane, cruel behavior. And then their victims become symptomatic. A child who is beaten is going to have symptoms, for instance. Sometimes they just withdraw. Sometimes they become super pleasing. Sometimes they have obsessive compulsive behaviors, like they're constantly cleaning or afraid of the dark. And sometimes they become really passive and manipulatable because they're so used to being overpowered that they've stopped fighting back. And the other side is they become really aggressive. They're so angry at the hurt that they've received that they start acting their anger out as aggression. And they become like the perpetrator. These are some of the children that become bullies on the playground. And then without any rescue. So the two main symptoms, I would say, and there's lots of subsymptoms, but the two main symptoms that come out of abuse, if it's not stopped and its victims don't get healed or get help, are learned helplessness, becoming really passive and manipulatable, and becoming like the aggressor. And if we don't, this is part of why I feel so concerned about our country today. If we don't stop this cycle of abuse, if we don't really pay attention to families and the well-being of children on a national level, then we're producing more children who are going to grow up to either feel helpless and manipulatable or aggressive and perpetrating. And we're seeing that playing out in our government. We have some of these people have run for office, and their policies and their practices are cruel and discriminatory and abusive, and they feel justified and they justify their actions. And then you have other people who go along with them because they're afraid to stand up, or they're afraid of being hurt worse. And I see this as an escalating cycle. And it worries me. And again, I want to repeat, there are millions of wonderful people in this country doing wonderful things. And one of the things that I uncovered when I was doing some of the research for my book were some statistics, and I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were a data that was gathered on how many people in the United States volunteer their time to be of service to others. And it's a huge amount of people. There's many good-hearted people going into prisons and doing restorative justice kinds of programs for prisoners. There's people who go into the inner city and teach people how to make rooftop gardens and grow their own food. And there's people who go into high schools and do extracurricular activities for disadvantaged youth. And the list goes on and on and on. But that's not actually the food we're being fed in the media. And we need good food. We need to be inspired to do good rather than to align ourselves with the hatred that's being spewed.
Folks, now, invariably, the media has a lot to do with what is happening in the country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, in a way, and this is another reason, and I'm not alone in this, my perspective comes out of years of my own experience, but I think there's many people who know that that our environment and the media in particular, because, everybody's got a phone now and they're on their phone and they're seeing what's being posted and they're seeing what's being proliferated on the news. And there's so much partisanship that it's hard to get any kind of a complete picture of anything, that this is the food our children are eating. This is the emotional and mental food that our children are being fed. And as adults, can we be responsible for feeding them better food? One of the things that, became so clear to me, okay, let's say you need to say on the news, maybe you need to say there was a shooting. Maybe you need to say that. Maybe people need to know. But let's talk about it like this is a tragedy. What happened in the life of the shooter? How can we prevent this? If that was, the thrust, rather than the police were after so-and-so and they cornered them and it's all a melodramatic, let's get the bad guy kind of thing. And I think we are beginning to be educated here, for instance. I think there's more knowledge that, like the young man who went into the school and killed the children, he was disturbed. And there were signs that he was disturbed before he did this. How can we begin? How can we begin to catch those signs before someone shoots up a school? But what are the conditions of their life that are producing this disturbance? And how, as a society and as individuals, can we do something to stop it? Whether it's poverty or sexual abuse or some other kind of discrimination, or not getting services for a disability, whatever it is, these are social conditions. This is the family of America that needs help. Does that make sense?
Sure. Now, thank you so much, Phyllis Leavitt, for your insight. And now your book, American in Therapy, is in the pipeline. Phyllis, what lit this spark? And can American ever get it right in terms of, get it right with the alarming mental health issues that is bedeviling her?
I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time understanding what you said. Can you ask that question again, just a little slower?
You have a book in the pipeline, American in Therapy, right? So what lit the spark? And the question also is, how can it ever get it right with the alarming mental health issues that is bedeviling her?
How can what?
How can America ever get it right with the alarming health issues that's bedeviling her?
How can we get it right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about, I want you to pick your point from your book. What are some of the takeaways we can learn from your book going forward?
Yeah, in terms of like what we can all do.
That's right, as regards mental health issues.
Yeah. So one of the, I take what my suggestions are for the country right out of what we do in the best psychotherapy. And and especially if you think about what's going on in Congress right now and the great divide and the hostility and the attacks and the blame and the resistance to coming together over any issue for the good of the American population. Often when people come to therapy, and let's talk about like a couple or a family, they come because they can't get along. They come because there's some big unresolved issue that someone is angry about or someone is hurt about, and they haven't been able to resolve. So the very first thing we do is create an environment that's safe for them to listen to one another. Because what happens in a fight, and we probably all know this from our own lives, are I'm insistent on making my point, and I want you to get it, and I want you to understand me, and I want you to agree with me, and I want you to say you're sorry, and I want you to, right? But you want the same thing from me. And so nobody's listening. We're just hammering each other with our different points of view as if that would work. And it doesn't. It doesn't work in a family, and it's not working in the family of America. It just creates more division, more hostility, and often more emotional and or physical violence. And so the first thing we do in psychotherapy is we make it safe for people to tell their story. And we set it up. You're just going to let this other person talk, and you're going to listen. Even if you don't agree, even if you have a bad reaction to what they're saying, even if you see it completely differently, we're going to make an environment in which you listen to the other person the way that you want to be heard, because we all want to be heard. And we don't know how to give that to one another. And most of us have had to learn. I didn't learn that in my childhood. I don't know anybody who learned it in their childhood, and bless the people who did learn that in their childhood. But most of us learned that somebody dominates with their opinion, and other people either fight back or they submit. And so we really help make it safe by saying exactly what I just said. Everyone wants to be heard, and we're helping you listen the way you want to be heard. So that's the first thing. And part of that is you talk, and we ask the other person just to reflect back what you said. They'll have time to respond later, but they're just reflecting. That lets you know, I heard you. What if we had mediators in Congress who were mediating the conversation about the hot topics and actually helping people on the two sides of the aisle listen to one another with respect, with the openness that the other person wants to be heard the way they want to be heard. And this is a big one, and I'm jumping over a lot of steps in the middle here. The purpose that people come to therapy is they want to repair the relationship. They want to feel love again. They want to feel safe again. They want to feel heard. They want to feel respected. They want to get along and go home and feel happy in their home with their loved ones. That's the goal. I don't yet even see that that's the goal in our country. The goal being we're repairing our broken human relations. We're finding a way to come back together so we can function together in harmony. And so for me, that's like ground level one, is creating safety to hear one another and starting to frame what we're doing with the goal of repair, with the goal of reconnecting, with the goal of looking at what the good is if it's a family, what's good for the family, not just what's good for me, what's good for everybody. And in our country, can we come together to look at what's good for everybody? What's safe, what's peaceful, what's restorative, and what provides for everyone? I don't see that yet as our agenda. And that to me is
once again.
I'm sorry?
Thank you once again for your time on the show. I really appreciate your time on the show. we'd like to get to know much about you and much about your book. Can you share any of your websites or social media handles? And also, I would like you to share with my audience any projects aside your book that you have you'd like to share with the audience. Do you have any projects in the pipeline?
I have, well, I'm right. I wrote this book and it's about bringing America to therapy, and it's not yet published. So, but it will be. And I have a website, www.phyllisleavitt.com. And if you go on my website and sign up for my newsletter, I can keep you informed about when my book will be out and available. And I'll also be writing some other things that are just timely about what's going on from my perspective in the world in the newsletter. And I'm hoping for it to come out on a monthly basis. I have a YouTube channel where I've posted other speaking and podcasts that I've done. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn, and I try to post, relevant articles and personal reflections that are meaningful for other people. So that's where you can find me. And I have also written 2 other books that are available called A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. And those are more about my spiritual journey in the past, but it all culminates kind of right now in the book that I'm writing about bringing America to therapy.
All right, we'll be on the lookout, Phyllis, and wish you best of luck in the project that you embark upon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, do you have any parting words you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just, I think sort of like a doctor, you go to the doctor and sometimes the diagnosis isn't so great. Like you need surgery or you need, a heavy duty kind of medicine. And I think it's a similar thing with a psychotherapist. Sometimes what you hear is the bad news, but the good news is, and I hope I've emphasized this enough, is the good news is that we see success in our offices. We see the cycle of abuse being broken. We see people being restored to healthy and safe human relations, or we see them peacefully being able to leave a bad situation. And so, I want to leave with a message of hope. And that's the reason why I wrote the book. I didn't write the book to just deliver the bad news. The good news is that we know so much about how to heal if we all know what's necessary, and if we could commit to that. I really believe it can be done. I believe people are really good in their hearts. I believe we all really do want the best for the people we care about, and we need to spread that to the rest of the world. That's my message.
I appreciate your inspiring line. Once again, and thank you for your time once again on the show. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any of these episodes of the show, you can do so on any cross promotion or any podcast distribution platforms you bump into, and do have a great time listening to the show. Thank you, Phyllis Leavitt, a psychotherapist, for sharing your thoughts on today's show, especially on mental health issues confronting the United States, and how we can move forward from there. I wish you best of luck once again in the projects that you're back upon.
And you too, with the great work you're doing. Thank you so much.
All right. Till I come your way, I need you to stay safe and be good. With all my love, I talk soon. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.